the angle was. There were a lot of voices. I heard Alec's voice. I heard Helena's voice. Everyone sort of talking at once. I don't have a clear memory of how long I was standing behind her. I know I got up behind her just to try to see on the monitor, and there was an incredibly loud bang that was not like the half and quarter loads you hear on a set. Those are sort of, they're loud poofs and pops. This was deafening. And it felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat to my shoulder. I remember that distinctly, and sort of stumbling back and shouting. I don't remember exactly what I said.
Were you able to see Ms. Hutchins at that time?
I did. I remember sort of stumbling back, and I either fell to my knees or I was sitting, and I distinctly remember her being lowered to the ground. People had her sort of by either side, and I still didn't quite know what had happened. Nothing made sense. I remember initially thinking, had she been startled by it, and they were sitting her down as a result, and then I saw the blood on her back.
And to the best of your recollection, what happened after that?
It got very chaotic. I remember them laying me down. I remember them laying her down next to me. Although we were sort of facing in opposite directions, my head was this way, her head was that way. I remember a lot of panic. I still just couldn't figure out what had happened. I thought, was there something that had been stuck in the barrel that came out? But just nothing made sense. I remember our dolly grip, Ross, coming to sort of grab me and trying to call me, and then Matt Hemmer came in, and between the two of them, I remember they sort of tended to me and were pulling up and just trying to find out where there was a hole.
Do you recall, Mr. Souza, at any point in time during that general time after the gun went off, having any kind of an interaction with Ms. Gutierrez?
I remember at one point looking up and her standing there with another person or a few other people, and she looked distraught. And I remember her saying, I'm sorry, Joel," and I remember somebody just screaming at her, and they just ushered her out.
Okay. At some point in time, were you taken from the scene?
Yeah, it's funny, when I hear later about how long we laid there, it felt like 5 minutes. And I remember looking over and her looking back at me. And she had the biggest brown eyes I've ever seen. And then, but I don't remember who they took out first. They put me on some kind of stretcher and rolled me out.
And where did they take you?
They told me they were going to take me to they just said they were going to take me to the hospital, and I kept begging them to take me where she was, but they said they couldn't and that they would later. And they eventually took me to, I think it's Christus St. Vincent, I think that's what it's called, in Santa Fe.
And when you were at the hospital, did you have an understanding that you had been actually shot by a bullet?
No. No. I mean, I knew something got me, but they kept talking about this bullet, and it could not compute for me. I just kept saying, you don't understand. No, 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 this was a movie set. That's not possible. You don't get it. And they kept saying, no, 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 it is. And I just keep insisting, you don't understand, because this is not possible. It's just not possible that there's a live round. It just can't. And then they eventually maybe grew tired of my protesting about it, because they showed me the x-ray of my back, and there was a very large bullet in it.
Okay. And sir, do you know whether Ms. Gutierrez was inside the church at the time that the gun went off?
I don't know.
In your experience, would you have had an expectation that she would have been in the church?
Yeah, the armor would be where the gun is.
Okay. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
So, Mr. Souza, I think before you testified that before the Rust movie, your experience with firearms was on Crown Vic. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Okay, and that was a movie you directed.
I directed and wrote Crown Vic, yeah.
And you wrote that, okay.
Yeah.
And that, I think you said, had a couple scenes involving firearms, is that right?
Well, where guns were fired, there were a few, yeah.
So you had an armorer on that set? Was that armorer full-time?
He was there for the days that the guns were going to be used or fired, yeah.
Is that the only occasion you've ever worked on a set with an armorer?
Yeah.
Okay. So is it fair to say your experience with working with armorers was fairly limited prior
Up to that point, yeah.
Okay. So are you familiar with the SAG safety rules, where if the armorer or prop master are not present, a responsibility falls on the AD?
I don't think I ever really reviewed the SAG rules. I don't think I would have been aware of what the procedure would have been if the armor wasn't there. I think my assumption was always that the armor was supposed to be there.
Okay, and you made an assumption, but if there's a SAG rule that indicates that responsibility then falls on the AD, are you aware of that?
That's not a rule that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. So you have not reviewed the SAG rules with respect to armorers in general, or firearm safety in general?
No, I'm not a SAG member, so.
Okay.
But no, I haven't, no.
Okay. So if in the church at that time, Ms. Gutierrez Reed was not present, and you don't remember?
I don't.
Okay. But Mr. Halls was. He was the first assistant director, correct?
He was the first assistant director, yes.
Now, you don't remember, I think you said, seeing who handed Mr. Baldwin the firearm.
That's correct.
And I think you said, sir, you don't remember Mr. Baldwin even having the revolver. You didn't see it. I mean, he had to have had it, but
I know he had it before lunch.
Yeah.
I know he had to have had it for obvious reasons, but I didn't see him holding it in that. It never got to that.
Okay. So before lunch, did you see who handed Mr. Baldwin the revolver?
No, I remember at some point before lunch hearing Dave call out Colt gun, but I don't remember who handed it to him.
Okay, and that's Dave Halls?
Yeah.
And Mr. Halls called out Colt gun before lunch that you remember?
As I remember that, yeah.
Okay. Was the blocking done before lunch as well for that scene?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on in that scene. We had sort of gotten to a certain point in it. What was coming next, we had not practiced before. What was coming next was essentially just picking up where we left off. That was what's called an insert. It was an insert shot.
Okay, sir, and this insert shot, this was going to be after lunch?
That was our first shot up after lunch.
Okay. And was this an insert shot of an extreme close-up on the hand as it's pulling from the holster?
Yeah, it was sort of, it was, what I had in mind was, again, I talked about it a little bit before, but you have this, the hand kind of coming out like this, pulling it, yeah.
And when you just demonstrated that, you had your hand coming across and pulling in front of you?
Correct.
Okay.
Because that's where he had, his thing was up here, so it would have naturally been going that way.
And do you know whether from the script, whether that firearm was supposed to be pointed towards the camera?
Well, I mean, it's not a matter of the script, really. For that specific shot, it was literally just supposed to be the gun being pulled out sideways.
Okay, sir, and when you demonstrated that, you did not have your hand pointed forward?
No.
Okay. So in that extreme close-up shot, it was just supposed to be pulled out in front? Just,
right.
Okay.
It was very short.
Okay. And was that designed to be like an insert to build tension in the scene?
Yeah, you cut back and forth and back and forth. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I understand. So at the time that occurred, after lunch, when you're doing that extreme close-up scene, was that called a blocking?
Yeah, it's sort of blocking for camera, yeah, to see, you know, they want to see where the focus needs to be, you know, and how it's going to look, which way the camera's going to be oriented, essentially. When I said auditioning the shot, it's essentially the same thing as the camera blocking for the shot.
So in essence, that scene is just setting up. There's not even filming going on at that point.
Correct.
Okay. So with regard to that, did you ever hear Mr. Baldwin insist on having his revolver for that scene?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Were you aware that generally during the movie he liked to have his hero guns?
I don't think it's unusual for actors to like that thing. I mean, again, in hindsight, it would have been easy to sort of say, focus on that and think about it. At the time, I don't know that I had a sort of a clear understanding of that or not.
Okay.
I just don't want to speculate. You know.
Right, absolutely. So your knowledge of that kind of firearm and in that particular scene, at that time it wasn't very extensive.
Right.
Okay. So in that scene there's a blocking and it's just going to be an extreme close-up. You were paying attention to the camera, as I understand. You're trying to look at the monitor?
Right. Like I said, I wanted to see what the angle was. Okay. But since the monitor wasn't up yet, I thought, well, I should go inside and try to catch a look at it there, because if it doesn't fit what I need to come next, there are very specific pieces I need.
Okay.
And if it doesn't fit what comes next, we should stop. You know, there was not a lot of time to waste that day. So
absolutely, the day started off behind.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that your attention was focused on trying to get the right kind of camera angle for that extreme close-up?
Yeah, because there's no real performance at play there. It's more of a technical exercise. It's just, right, here's what I need to happen in this close-up in the editing room so that I can get this to work.
So at that time, and taking it back to that time, you're more focused on trying to get the scene set up. Your focus is not on looking around to see if Miss Gutierrez Reed is in the church. Is that fair?
I'd say that's fair, correct.
Okay. And so at the time, did it occur to you at all to look around and see if the armor is there, and if not, to semi-collar?
No, I wouldn't say that it did.
Okay. And because at that time there wasn't even going to be more than just pulling out of a holster, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So you didn't you didn't know she was in the church, so obviously you didn't hear anybody go get her or call her back in.
Like I said, there were so many voices going on. I'm just trying to focus on what I can focus on at that point.
Absolutely. You described it, and I kind of get the picture in my head. It was a little bit, all kinds of things are going on at that moment. There's people trying to set up the cameras, and tell me if I'm wrong, or why don't you tell it in your words?
Well, there's just a lot of people moving in a lot of different directions. There's the special effects people hanging what are called poppers from the ceiling. They're sort of what I talk about. During the gunfight, they will pop and then debris will come raining down. There are people positioning lights. There are people moving cameras. There are wardrobe people in and out. There are, there's just a lot. It's, and under normal circumstances, it's quite a thing to watch, frankly.
I also want to ask you on the long rifle, the Henry rifle.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have much knowledge of how the Henry rifle works?
Beyond what I'd read about it when I was writing the script, no. I know it's a lever action,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what appealed to me in a visual sense. And but beyond that, not really, no.
Okay. Do you have much experience in general with knowing types of firearms, how they function?
No, outside of movies, I have nothing to do with guns.
Okay. Now, on that Henry rifle, there was one scene in the script where Mr. Baldwin's character is supposed to come out of the shack or whatever the structure
Mm-hmm.
is, and he's firing at the lawmen. You remember that, sir?
Right.
And that involved, did that involve his hero gun, the Henry rifle?
He was carrying it. He was not going to be firing it. It proved impractical.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, do you know that the Henry rifle is made such that there's a plunger on the bottom, and when the rounds are loaded, you can see or not see if rounds are in that rifle?
No, like I said, I'm not any kind of expert on a rifle.
Okay. Part of the armor's duties, would you agree with, they're to be there also for if the particular weapon Mr. Baldwin's holding needs to look like it's loaded, that's their job. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Because you got to have a realistic feel for the audience. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's the entire reason dummies exist.
Okay. And so if the Henry rifle, if you can see at the bottom whether rounds are loaded or dummy rounds are loaded or not, that would be something that would you would want the armorer to handle.
If it was required for the scene, yes.
Okay. And in that particular scene, Mr. Baldwin is going to confront these lawmen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, with regard to dummies, I think you said before Rust, you weren't very familiar with dummies either.
I wasn't really familiar with the term of it. I think, I guess it's, I would have assumed that there was, if I'd watch a Western and you see something and they have a gun pointed and there's something at the end of there's something in the cylinders or whatever those are called. I would assume there's something in there. I wouldn't quite know what it is, but
okay.
Yeah.
And you talked about on the second go-round in your direct, you completed the Rust filming?
We did.
And on that second filming, did you use wooden dummies?
I wouldn't even call them dummies because they didn't ever get loaded into anything. When there was a situation where we had to match previous shots, like on a bandolier where somebody had what would look like bullets, the armorer on that go-round had made them out of wood and then painted them and tucked them into the bandoliers.
Okay. And you know that the purpose of a dummy round is to look very like a live round.
Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to safety on the set, who is the person in general that's responsible?
Well, I think in a general sense, the first assistant director is the safety officer on set. But beyond that, I think it also, a set is generally a reel if you see something, say something, things. So everybody is responsible to some degree to try to make sure there's a safe work environment. In terms of our safety officer, and generally the first AD is the safety officer.
And what you just said, and first AD is in charge of that, but if anybody on set sees something unsafe, they should say something.
Yes, I think an example would be if there's an extension cord that's not taped down, or there's something that someone could hit their head on or something. You want to try to head those things off. There are a lot of sharp corners on movie sets.
Now, ultimately, with regard to safety, the producers are where the buck stops. Do you agree with that?
I think the producers are the people who write the checks are generally where the buck stops on everything in life. I don't think a movie set is any different.
One other portion, Mr. Baldwin, when you talked about earlier about the armorer saying something to him, did you ever communicate to the armorer if she had issues that she needed to confront Mr. Baldwin or tell Mr. Baldwin, or did you ever say anything about that?
I don't think we ever talked about that. I think she and I might have had 2 conversations all told.
Okay.
But that wouldn't have been one of them.
Okay. And would you agree with me, Mr. Baldwin has a fairly strong personality in that movie?
Sure. I think, yeah.
And we saw some clips on that. Finally, you mentioned that the day 3, you felt good about how that went. And it was an amazing team of professionals, I think you said, that pulled together and did a good job. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we had a very strong crew.
And Ms. Gutierrez Reed also performed very well that day.
Yeah, on that day I didn't take any issue.
Yeah.
I was happy with everybody.
Okay. All right, Your Honor, may I have just a moment? I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Just briefly, Mr. Souza, do you recall a single scene that was going to be filmed in the movie where anyone was loading the rifle with ammunition?
No.
Do you recall a single scene in the movie that was going to be filmed where anyone was cycling ammunition through the rifle?
No.
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
You're excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Can we approach real quick?
Yeah, but we're not taking a lunch break.
What's that?
State your next witness.
The state calls Emery Chacon.
Face the judge and raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you just move a little closer to the microphone and speak into the microphone, sir?
There we go.
Thank you. Would you state your name?
Name is Emery Chacon.
And in October of 2021, how were you employed?
I worked the front desk at the Inn at Santa Fe.
And during that same month, did you befriend Hannah Gutierrez?
I did.
And during your friendship with her, did you have an opportunity to be, well let me back up. How did you get to know Ms. Gutierrez through your work at the hotel?
Well, I work the second shift, so I check in guests. It's my job to be polite, friendly to guests, so being polite, friendly, started small talk.
Was Ms. Gutierrez a guest at the hotel?
Yes.
Do you know if other crew members from the set of Rust were also staying at that hotel?
There were other crew members.
And at any point in time during your friendship with Ms. Gutierrez, did you have an opportunity to be in her hotel room?
Yes.
And if you recall, approximately how many times would you have been in her hotel room?
Can't really recall. Maybe a handful of times.
Handful of times, okay. And when you were in her hotel room, did you ever take notice of any boxes of ammunition?
Yes.
And I want to be clear, are you familiar with guns and ammunition at all?
I am.
Based on your experience, were you able to determine whether the ammunition was for pistols or rifles or anything?
I saw what looked like maybe a couple of rifle rounds, maybe shotgun shells, maybe one pistol round.
And when you say that you saw the rounds, were they in boxes?
There were a few that were not in boxes, that were sitting on the counter in the room.
And to the best of your recollection, were any of the rounds that were not in boxes pistol rounds?
One.
One was a pistol round. Do you recall approximately when you saw, and let me ask you, other than the rounds that were not in boxes, did you see boxes inside? Did you also see boxes of ammunition in the room?
Yes.
And do you know whether the ammunition that you saw was real ammunition or fake ammunition for the movie?
I don't know the physical difference between fake ammunition and real ammunition.
Understood. Do you recall approximately when you would have noticed the ammunition in her hotel room?
It was maybe towards an evening. In terms of like exactly what day, I can't give.
Do you know whether it was towards the beginning of her stay or the end of her stay?
Towards the beginning.
Did you see the ammunition in her room on more than one occasion?
No.
Just one occasion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-exam.
Thank you. So, Mr. Tricone, I think you said you were a hotel desk clerk.
Yes, sir.
And sir, what hotel was that?
The Inn at Santa Fe.
Okay. As part of being a desk clerk at the hotel, did you check Miss Gutierrez Reed in when she started her stay?
I did.
Now, you did not know her before that, right?
No.
So you just came acquainted with her from her being a patron and coming to the hotel and you checking her in to stay there?
That is correct.
You said she at the start of her stay is when you believe you saw the ammunition. What day was that?
I can't recall.
Do you recall if that was in September of 2021, October of 2021? Do you have any idea?
Maybe mid-September.
Late September?
About.
Okay. Okay, and you were up in her room. I know that you all texted, that you had texted Miss Gutierrez Reed, is that right?
Yes.
And did you go to a movie with her one time?
Yes.
Now after that, didn't you want to keep texting her and have a different type of relationship with her?
Quite possibly.
Okay. That's what you wanted, isn't it, at that time?
Not too sure how it would have worked out, but perhaps.
Okay. And it was pretty clear from her text back that that's not what she wanted to do, right?
Yes.
Okay. Over a period of time, you kept texting her, and she just quit texting. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. Now, I know that you said on direct that you can't tell the live ammunition from a blank ammunition, for example. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. And you also probably wouldn't be able to tell a dummy round from a live round, right?
Correct.
Now these boxes that you had mentioned, do you remember what color they were?
I remember they were kind of a army green, hard plastic.
Okay, and you just don't know exactly what was in them or what they contained?
No.
Okay. And in late September, you're aware that the filming had not started yet for the movie, or do you have any knowledge of that? Okay. Do you have any knowledge of when the movie started filming?
No knowledge.
Okay. You're gonna have nothing further. Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you're excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness.
The state calls Wyatt Mortensen.
Stand before the judge, raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. Have a seat. Talking to the microphone.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Go ahead and state your name for the record.
Wyatt Mortensen.
Mr. Mortensen, what do you do for a living?
I'm a wrangler and stuntman.
Explain to the jury what it means to be a wrangler.
We take care of the horses on the movie set. We give actors riding lessons, and we make sure that nothing bad happens to the horses or anybody that's around them.
Were you employed as a wrangler on the set of Rust?
I was.
In your capacity as a wrangler on the set of Rust, how frequently were you on set?
Pretty much every day.
Okay. And in addition to taking care of horses, Were you also in some of the scenes that were filmed?
I was.
And in what capacity were you in those scenes?
I would dress out and drive wagons or ride horses in the background. Some stunts.
Okay, great. Can you give the ladies and gentlemen of the jury an idea about your background and experience in the film industry as a wrangler and or stuntman?
Yes. I just got in the industry when I turned 18, which was 4 years ago. And since then, I've been working pretty frequently on 24 films, give or take. As a wrangler in stunts, I've worked with numerous actors and many different people that are big in the movie industry.
Mr. Mortensen, prior to working on the set of Rust, did you work on any other movies that had guns and armorers?
I did.
Do you recall approximately how many films you worked on that had guns and armorers prior to Rust?
About every movie I've worked on.
Okay, every movie.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us an idea of how many movies that would have been prior to Rust?
Prior to Rust, maybe 5, I'd say.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity while you were on set to see Ms. Gutierrez perform her work as the set armorer?
I did.
And was there anything about the manner in which she performed her work that caused you concern?
Nothing directly.
Let me ask you this. Do you recall, can you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how she brought the guns and ammunition to set from the prop cart?
Just carry them by hand.
Did that seem unusual to you?
Nothing too unusual. No.
Mr. Mortensen, do you, hang on just one second. Do you recall an incident where a rifle was lost on the set?
I do.
Can you explain to us how a rifle was lost or what you recall about that?
We were doing a stunt in the middle of town, and after we were done, I was asked if I've seen a rifle anywhere on set.
Do you recall who asked you that?
I do not.
Okay. Do you know whether the rifle was found?
I don't.
Mr. Mortensen, did you ever take notice of guns and ammunition being left unattended on set?
I did.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you saw with regard to guns and ammunition being left unattended?
I seen guns and ammunition on a small cart that was left on the set periodically.
And when you say periodically, how frequently do you think you saw guns and ammunition left unattended on that cart?
Most days that we had guns.
In your experience with armorers on movie sets, did that seem unusual to you?
Yes.
And if you recall, or if you can estimate, approximately how long would the guns and ammunition be left unattended on that cart?
I can't truly recollect.
Sir, do you recall in this case having a pretrial interview where you had to show up and talk to us about your testimony?
Via Zoom, yes.
Yeah, that's right, via Zoom. Do you recall specifically what you said during that interview about approximately how long the guns and ammunition would be left unattended?
I can't remember.
Would it refresh your memory if I showed you a transcript of our conversation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. May I?
Yes.
And if you want me to scroll. Did that refresh your memory?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Can you answer my question now?
Yeah. Close to an hour or so. Yeah, sometimes more.
Do you have personal experience with firearms?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell the difference between real firearms and replica or fake firearms?
If I'm handed one and I can see it closely, yes.
Do you know whether the firearms that you saw regularly left unattended on the prop cart were real?
Yes, most of them seemed real.
Okay. And when you say they seemed real, how would you know that?
Just because most of the guns on the movie set were real.
And did you see scenes that were filmed on the movie where the guns would shoot blanks?
Yes.
Do fake guns fire blanks?
No.
Okay, only real guns fire blanks, right?
Yes.
Okay. And sir, did you take note during your time on the set of Rust? Did you notice whether or not Ms. Gutierrez's conduct as an armorer with regard to handing firearms to actors and taking firearms away from actors when a scene was over? Do you recall taking note of that?
Yes.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what, if anything, you noticed about the manner or how quickly Ms. Gutierrez would remove real firearms from actors when a scene was over?
It would depend on the scene and who the actors were.
Do you recall taking note that when a scene would be over, she would not immediately collect the firearms from the actors?
Yes.
Did that stand out to you?
Yes.
Why?
Every other show I'd been on previous to that, the armor would hand the gun right before the scene and take it away right after.
And that was not Ms. Gutierrez's practice?
Not that I can recollect.
Okay. And sir, do you have personal knowledge and experience with revolvers?
Fairly decent.
Do you recall taking note of the manner in which Ms. Gutierrez would conduct the barrel check of the revolvers?
There was a few moments that I did notice, yes.
Okay. But first of all, I want you to kind of explain to the jury what your understanding is of why a barrel check is done and how it should be done.
Well, from my experience, the reason...
Sure.
Mr. Mortensen, let's proceed. Did you notice anything that caught your eye about the way that Ms. Gutierrez would conduct the barrel checks?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you notice specifically?
Can you describe specifically?
Well, let me do this. Do you recall discussing this during the interview that we did with you over Zoom?
I believe so, yes.
Do you recall exactly what you said to us that day?
I think so, yeah.
Do you need it? Do you need to see it to have your memory refreshed at all?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Hang on just a second. 10? May I?
Yes.
Let me make sure I'm on the right spot. Okay.
Which line is Carrie?
10 through 21? And take your time. Mr. Mortensen, did that refresh your memory?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you answer my question now?
I can. So there would be moments on the set, and one that I can truly recollect was she took the gun from Alec and to check to see if the gun was clean, which there's a process that armors do, and
Can you tell the jury, in your experience, what that process is?
yeah, in my experience, you always make sure you check if a gun is clean or how many rounds are inside the gun. But what you can do is you open the cylinder, and this is speaking with single action pistols, and you take the cylinder out, and because blanks have a lot of debris that comes out with the gunpowder, you check the barrel sometimes to just see if anything is lodged in there, because that can shoot out with the gunpowder. And you open the cylinder and you can look down the barrel, and if the cylinder is open, it's impossible to be shot or anything bad happen, because you can see straight through and you see daylight through the barrel of the gun.
And what caught your eye about the way that Ms. Gutierrez did those barrel checks?
When she looked, the cylinder was closed.
And so in your experience, when she looks and the cylinder is closed, what would she be able to see?
Nothing.
I'll pass the witness.
Cross-exam.
Mr. Mortensen, isn't it true that you can see light through that barrel just by pulling back the hammer?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know of? You're not an armor, are you?
No, ma'am.
And you've never worked as an armor on any movie, have you?
No, ma'am.
In fact, in the filming of Rust, you were a wrangler, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Your responsibility is animals, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Horses,
Yes, ma'am.
donkeys.
No.
You weren't responsible for the donkey? I thought we heard testimony about a donkey. That wasn't you, right?
Not that I can recollect.
Okay. And in fact, during the Rust filming, isn't it true that you didn't even wear a real firearm? You had a replica rubber gun, right?
Not that I can recollect.
You don't recollect if you wore if you had a real firearm on Rust? Is that what you're saying?
I can't remember if I had even a gun belt on.
Okay. At any time when you would have a gun on Rust, wasn't it a rubber one?
Not that I can recollect.
So you don't remember if you had a real gun or a rubber gun on this movie set. Is that what you're saying?
I can remember holding both a live gun and a rubber gun, but...
On the filming of Rust?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, in your direct testimony, one of the things I thought I wrote down that I heard you say was there is nothing directly about Ms. Gutierrez's work on that set that caused you concern. Do you remember telling the jury that in direct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you saw these guns on top of that cart, you weren't right over the prop cart, right? You were further away from that.
Beside it.
Were you even able to tell if these were non-functioning or functioning firearms?
Not that I could tell.
Okay, so in your have you ever seen on any of the movies you've worked on a part-time armorer?
Never.
And in this filming on Rust, was there a time when horses ever got loose?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that that was an extremely dangerous situation?
I'll object to... Oh, I'm sorry. Let's approach.
Mr. Mortensen, do you need me to repeat the question?
No.
Okay, so can you answer the question?
Yes.
So horses, it is a dangerous thing to have horses on set, right?
Yes.
And you were the one responsible for wrangling those, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall a time on Rust when you had a problem getting paid on time?
Can we approach?
Mr. Mortensen, I'll re-ask the question here. So do you ever recall a time on Rust when you had a problem getting paid on time?
I can't truly recollect.
Would it refresh your memory to take a look at your pretrial interview transcript?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, just a sec. Got a minute? First witness. Did that refresh your recollection?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So was there ever a time on Rust that you recall not being paid on time?
Yes, at the very beginning.
Okay. Just a second, Your Honor.
No further questions. Two more questions. Maybe one. Two. Mr. Mortensen, have you ever testified in court before?
No, ma'am.
I want to be clear. Did you see guns left unattended on the prop cart after shooting scenes that involved the firing of blank ammunition?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
All right, this witness is excused. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, we're going to take our lunch break. Please be back at 1:10. Okay, downstairs at 1:10. Please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court. Thank you.
All rise.
that
Is that what, I think the water is new. It's hers, okay.
Have you been sworn in? I have not. Face the judge, raise your right hand.
Do you swear affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Have a seat. Talk into the microphone.
Ma'am, go ahead and state your full name for the record.
My name is Sherilyn Schaefer.
Ms. Schaefer, how are you currently employed?
I am employed as an EMT in the film industry, a medic.
Can you just explain to the jury the situation, the connection between movie sets and medics? Is a medic always on a movie set, and if so, why?
Usually, if it's a union show, a medic is always on set for the potential that there could be something dangerous that happens. But 99% of the time, we are in charge of making sure the actors, and not necessarily the actors, but the crew have sunscreen, bug spray, Advil, electrolytes. If it's hot out, we make sure everyone stays hydrated. If it's cold, we hand out hot hands. That's majority of it. If somebody gets a splinter or a cut, we take care of those as well. If somebody gets injured enough that they need to go to get stitches or be seen, we bandage them up, we send them off. And then we are in charge of the paperwork that goes with the production to make sure that the injury can be to go through workers' comp, so that it's not coming out of the crew or whoever's insurance.
Okay. How long have you worked generally in the film industry?
I started in the film industry in 2008, or I'm sorry, 2009.
Okay. And how long have you worked as a medic in the film industry?
Since 2014.
And can you summarize for the jury what your medical training consisted of that allowed you to be qualified for this position?
I'm a licensed EMT.
All right. Ms. Schaefer, approximately, since 2009, if you can guesstimate for us approximately how many films have you worked on?
Film and TV?
Sure.
40 plus.
Okay, and of those, can you guesstimate for us again approximately how many had real firearms and an armorer on set?
Maybe 10, 12.
Was the handling of firearms by the armorer on the set of Rust different than what you were used to?
Yes.
Can you describe to the jury what you noticed, how you thought it was different?
I noticed the armorer on Rust did not secure the weapons as a normal armorer would, or an armorer on productions I've worked on before would. Normally, the weapon would be secured until it was time for the actor or stunt actor to need it. And then the armorer would go to their, generally a locked cabinet, grab the weapon, take it to the actor or stunt actor. With the first AD, sometimes the stunt coordinator, depending on who's there, open the weapon, empty it. If it needs to be emptied, show the actor or stunt actor the type of bullet, I guess you would call it, that's going to be in the gun. Show it that it's not real, and then, or essentially check it in front of the actor and the first AD to make sure that everyone's comfortable with it. And then hand it over to that performer for the shot, for whatever shot they are shooting.
Just to be clear, what you just described was what you are accustomed to.
That is correct.
Can you explain to the jury how that procedure worked on the set of Rust?
A lot of times when I would notice our armorer hand the guns over to the actors, sometimes checking them, sometimes not. Generally, once the scene is over, you would remove the weapon. The armorer would remove the weapon from the actor and re-secure it until it is needed again. On Rust, that did not happen a good majority of the time. The actor still remained in possession of the weapon, whether it was in their holster or in their hands.
And can you kind of explain to the jurors how long the actors would be left with the weapons in their possession after the scene, and maybe discuss a little bit about how long it takes to do a turnaround?
Okay, there were a few times where they would have the weapon for a minute or two or so after we had cut, but then there would be other times where we would be turning around, and that's where the camera position changes. Like if we're looking at somebody and we turn around, then we're going to look the other direction at the actor. That can take, depending on all the moving parts, 20, 30 minutes, where they would still be in possession of the weapon.
And I just want to be clear, did you testify that you saw Ms. Gutierrez provide actors with weapons without conducting a safety check?
That is correct.
Did you ever have an occasion to notice whether or not any of the actors on the set of the movie did their own safety checks?
There were some times that opening it up and looking at it, and generally on a film set, you would not do that without the armorer present in front of you. And if you did, then the armorer would need to be called back to recheck that weapon in front of you.
So when the actors would do their own safety checks, was Ms. Gutierrez participating in that?
Sometimes she was near, sometimes she wasn't. I don't recall exactly all the time. I didn't notice a lot, but there were some times where she could have been close by or not, but she was not directly in front of the actor.
Okay.
And it wasn't every actor. It was, just a couple here and there.
Okay. Did you ever take note of how Ms. Gutierrez would load ammunition into her fanny pack?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer, do you recall the question?
Could you repeat it again, please?
Did you ever take note of how Ms. Gutierrez would transfer ammunition from boxes to her fanny pack?
Yes. There was one occasion that I did see that.
Can you describe what you saw for the jury?
So there would be the boxes that had a styrofoam with the ammunition inside of it. And there were times I would see her this one time, I saw her take the box and kind of tip it a little bit and use her fingers to put some in, and then hand it back, I believe, to Ms. Zachary, and get another box and do the same thing, put more in, put it back, get another box, put more in, put it back. So we're mixing multiple rounds inside of different, and again, I don't know what they were, but mixing different rounds for different weapons. There were some short ones, some long ones.
So during this instance where you saw Ms. Gutierrez load the fanny pack directly from the boxes. If you recall, would she take the time to check every round to make sure that it was inert?
No.
All right. In your experience in the film industry, does the armor always stay with the firearm?
Yes. Or within proximity. Be able to visually see. You mean when the actor has the weapon?
Correct.
Yeah, to be able to visually see.
Was that the case on the set of Rust?
No. Not always.
I'm going to shift gears and direct your attention to October 21st of 2021. If you can just kind of walk the jury through how that day went and what you recall. You can start before the lunch hour, and then we'll kind of move through it, okay?
Okay. About 6:30 was my call time that morning, and that's what time that I needed to be on set. I arrived on set. I arrived to base camp first, grabbed breakfast. I don't remember if we had a COVID test that day or not, but then I went up to set, and I have a trauma bag that I take with me, and I have a box and a stand that has, inside the box will have the emergency, it will have tissue, it'll have cough drops, it'll have those sorts of things that a crew member might want, as well as containers of sunscreen and bug spray, because at that time we had the sun and bugs. So I went and I set my stuff down at the middle of the town, and on the radio there was a little bit of noise about the camera department being behind schedule, and I had asked somebody, I'm not sure who, one of our one of our other ADs or one of our PAs on set, production assistants on set. I had asked what was going on, and they had said that the camera department was not ready to go, and wouldn't be ready to go on time. I generally am friends with the majority of everybody on set. I've worked with everybody a lot, and so I went over to where the camera truck was to kind of see if I could see what was going on or talk to anybody about what was going on, because I knew that they had had some issues with the production. And I noticed that they were packing up all their equipment. You know, so I watched them do that for a little while, but then I had to go back to setting everything else up that I had to set up. And at some point in time, our first AD, Dave Halls, had called for a safety meeting that morning, which was rare. And it was more of a meeting to kind of get the crew back together again, because we were all kind of spread out and trying to figure out what was going on that morning. And so he you know, in the safety meeting, he just said that we were going to have a... I'm assuming, okay, sorry.
I can say what it is.
Ms. Schaefer, without saying what anyone said, can you summarize for the jury what your understanding was of the purpose for that meeting?
The purpose of that meeting was to get the crew back together as we were scattered, to try to get the day started. We were already so far behind with the camera crew leaving.
And when scenes are being filmed on the set, are you present every time a scene is being filmed?
95% of the time, unless I need to use the restroom or something.
Okay. Were scenes being filmed that morning before lunch?
Yes.
And were you present for those?
Yes.
Do you recall if any of those scenes involved the use of firearms?
I'm not sure about the first scene. I don't remember what we shot. The second part was before lunch, right after we moved up to the church. We had a scene. I'd like to say that used weapons, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Did you, during that scene, did you see any of the handoff of the weapon from the armorer to the actor?
I did not.
Okay. And then at some point, do you go to lunch?
Yes.
And when lunch is over, tell us what happens.
After lunch, I had gotten a ride up to set from our base camp, which was just a few minutes away down the road, and I had walked from where they drop us off up to where the church is, and was waiting for the rest of the crew and the rest of the departments to get to set as well. And so I sat down on the end of a tailgate that was nearby. I believe it was electric truck, but I'm not positive.
Okay. Tell us what happened after that.
Sorry.
It's okay, take your time.
I was talking to whoever was sitting next to me, maybe a locations person, I don't remember, and the sound of a gun went off, or I heard the sound of a gun. And I looked over at who was sitting next to me and I said, are we rehearsing? Because I didn't know that we were back in at that point, and I hadn't heard anything on the radio about us being back in and from lunch. And I said I didn't hear anybody call, fire in the hole, or normally like you would hear, the armorer would say quarter load, half load, full load, whatever type of ammunition that they are shooting. And none of that was said. So as soon as I said that, I grabbed the bag, my normal bag, and I ran towards the church. I wasn't very far from it. And as I was approaching the door, I heard medic emergency come over the radio.
And are you the only medic on set?
I am.
Okay. So when you heard medic emergency on the radio, did that information tell you where to go?
No.
How did you know where to go?
I was there. I was sitting there, outside the church waiting.
Okay, understood. Please proceed.
So I got to the door, and one of the things that we are taught when you're becoming an EMT is your scene needs to be safe before you go into it. So I stood at the door and I looked around to see what was happening, and I asked what happened, and somebody said, Helena was shot, or the gun went off, something to that effect. And I looked down at Helena, who had been sitting at that point to my right, and Joel was on the left in obvious pain. And Alec Baldwin was at the back of the church from me, the opposite end of the church from me. And then I looked down at Helena again, and as I started going towards her, I believe it was our camera operator, Reed, had asked her if she could feel her legs. And for one, I believe she said yes. For the other one, she said no. And so I knew that there was some sort of spinal injury at that point. And as I was going towards her, I could see the blood dripping from her back onto the church floor.
Was she still seated at this point, or was she?
She was leaning kind of on a pew.
Okay.
And in my smaller bag, I carry trauma shears, and so I started cutting up the back of her jacket to try to find where she was bleeding from. And at some point in time, I believe it was Ann Shim, our second AD, asked me if there's anything that I needed or she could do for me. And before that, I'm sorry, I called out on the radio for somebody to call 911. We would need an ambulance. And Ann then asked me if I needed anything, and I asked her to get me my bigger trauma bag, because that's where I keep my trauma-related items. And she did, and I asked her to also call Matt Hemmer, who's one of our electricians, I asked her to call him because he had some previous military experience medically, and he was one of the people I knew I could get up there to help me. Being the only medic and 2 patients is not easy. And so I had him just take over for Joel while I tended to Helena.
And so if you can kind of explain to us what kind of treatment you attempted with regard to Miss Hutchins.
When I cut up the front of her, or the back of her jacket, I'm sorry, I grabbed some gauze and I put it on the one hole that I could find at that point. And I asked, at that point, I believe it was Reed was next to me. I gave him a glove and I asked him to hold that gauze there. And sometime in the meantime, we had moved the pews, or the guys had moved the pews away and laid her down. And I went to the front of her to cut up the front of her shirt, to the chest area, to try to find the other hole, knowing that Joel had been shot. I knew that it was a through and through, or in one side out the other.
You already suspected that it was a through and through?
Yes, because
okay.
Because of the way that Joel was screaming in pain. I knew he had likely, whatever had gone through her had gone into him as well.
Okay, please proceed.
So I cut up the front and I could not find an entrance wound, and so I had to keep looking until I found the other wound. I didn't know what was entrance and what was exit at that point. And when I did, I grabbed another gauze that I have and I put it there to apply pressure. And I'm not sure at what point. I think I asked Serge or somebody who was somebody else who was nearby to hold that and apply pressure while I went and grabbed oxygen.
Okay, and so give us just a little bit of information about your oxygen apparatus and what you did with that.
It's in my main bag, so I grabbed my main bag and pulled it over, and it's a non-rebreather, so it's the mask that goes over the face, and it has a bag at the bottom that inflates, and so the oxygen is delivered that way through the mask. It's got the things that go around the back of the head, hold the mask on.
Okay, and just to be clear, we heard some testimony earlier in the trial about Ms. Hutchins being intubated. Did you have anything to do with that process?
I did not.
Okay. Go ahead and proceed.
So I put oxygen on her and I called back to the ambulance, on the radio, I'm sorry. I called back on the radio to make sure, to have somebody call back, or whoever was communicating with 911, that we would need 2 ambulances and a bird at that point, because I knew Joel would need an ambulance and she was going to need a helicopter.
You already knew she was going to need a helicopter?
With that kind of trauma, yes. We are 15, 18 minutes from the hospital, from town, and with the way that she was bleeding, I knew she was gonna need more than we could provide, or an ambulance could provide, or Santa Fe hospitals could provide. She needed to go to the trauma center in Albuquerque.
Okay, and do you have any knowledge about the condition that a patient has to be in order for the helicopter to take off?
They need to be stabilized.
And do you know why that is, given your medical training?
I do not.
Okay, fair enough. After you called for 2 ambulances and a helicopter, what did you do at that point in time?
I just continued. Helena was fighting. She didn't want the oxygen on her face. She didn't want anybody holding anything on her. She was fighting. And Serge was there too.
Were you, after, we understand that you were providing oxygen and that Ms. Hutchins was struggling with that. Was there anything else that happened other than that before paramedics arrived and took over that you can recall?
There was a point in time when I first had walked in, there were still people inside, and so I had said to whoever was there, AD wise, to remove anybody that was in the church that didn't need to be there. If they weren't some of the people that I had asked to help, then they needed to be removed, Alec being one of them. He was still in the church shortly after I got in there. Sorry, I'm bouncing backwards a little bit.
No, it's okay. So you asked an assistant director to do that for you?
I believe either assistant director or PA, somebody.
And a PA is a production assistant?
Production assistant, which is when you're first trying to get in the union as a in their union as an AD, you have to become a PA first, and you have to have so many days of PA work that you submit to the union before you can start as the next. I believe it's the second is the.
Okay, all right, understood. So whoever it was that you spoke to and you asked them to remove Mr. Baldwin and any other unnecessary people, did that person do that for you?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, did paramedics arrive?
Yes.
Do you have any idea how long it took them to get there?
It felt like forever. I believe, though, it was. I don't have an exact time. I believe 12, 15 minutes.
Okay. And
I do believe that there was a before the ambulance arrived. There might have been somebody else, a police officer, maybe that was around, but ambulance-wise, it was quite some time.
Okay, and do you recall a police officer coming in with a medical bag and handing items to you?
I do, vaguely, but I do.
Okay. In your medical training, are you aware of the procedure that's done when a person is intubated, even though you didn't participate in that in this case?
Yes.
And are you aware that sometimes... Objection. Okay, Ms. Schaefer, I'm not gonna finish that question. Thank you very much. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-exam.
Hello, Ms. Schaefer.
Hello.
I want to start with this incident you talked about on direct with the ammunition and Ms. Gutierrez putting it into her fanny pack, okay?
Okay.
So first, you don't know the difference between blanks and dummies, right?
I do not visually.
Right, and is what you saw in that one instance, Sarah Zachary bringing Hannah Gutierrez the different boxes of ammunition?
She was next to Hannah. I'm not sure exactly where the boxes were staged.
Right, but you saw Sarah bring her a box, and then Ms. Gutierrez take the rounds and put them in her fanny pack, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you don't know if Sarah had shaken those boxes before she brought, or those rounds before she brought them, right?
I do not.
Can metal prop guns that can't fire, like replicas, like gun replicas, would those require safety checks? Okay, Ms. Schaefer, you said you worked on several film sets before, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've given us testimony today about what you saw and safety checks and whatnot, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what a replica gun is?
Can you? I can tell you. I would not know if somebody showed me put a plastic gun near me or one that could fire. So whichever way you were referring to replica, I do not know. Because I would consider that a prop gun versus something the armorer would be in charge of.
So you are not, did you just say you don't know the difference between a replica gun and a real gun?
If I were not to see them, touch them in front of me, no, I would not.
Are you aware whether a replica gun even requires safety checks?
I'm confused by your words. Do you mean if you mean a rubber gun, that does not need safety checks. You would not check a rubber gun. But if it is a gun that you put ammunition of any kind in, whether it's dummy or, whatever the quarter loads that they use, then those would need to be checked for safety. But a rubber gun would not.
And you're saying that despite never working as an armorer before, right?
That is correct. I am not an armorer.
And you've never even worked in props as a props assistant, have you?
I have not worked in props. That is not my craft.
And have you ever worked on a set where there was actually a part-time armor?
Part-time? No. Right. Day players, yes, but not part-time.
So who is in charge of the gun cart when the armor has to go to the restroom?
That would I've never been in that situation. If somebody needed, if the armorer was in the restroom, I would assume we would wait until the armorer was available to do their job. That would not be somebody for any other department that I am aware of.
When you saw this incident with Sarah Zachary bringing Hannah this ammunition, and you saw Hannah, you said put it in a fanny pack, right?
Correct.
You don't know if those were blanks or dummies, do you?
I do not.
And were you aware that Ms. Gutierrez's fanny pack had multiple separators in it?
I was not. I did not. I just saw her pouring them in. I did not see anything other than the pouring motion.
And you don't follow Ms. Gutierrez or Sarah Zachary all day on set, do you?
I do not.
And you don't know if there are safety checks done that were out of your presence, do you?
I do not.
Is it true that you have filed a lawsuit against David Hall's PDQ, Seth Kinney, and Sarah Zachary, and Hannah Gutierrez?
Yes, it is true.
Among others, right?
Correct.
And in that lawsuit, you claim that you've been traumatized by the incident, right?
Absolutely.
And you are actually seeking money damages in that lawsuit for extreme emotional distress?
That is correct.
Did you in fact obtain a civil judgment against Sarah Zachary in that lawsuit for a sum of money?
It has been entered into judgment, yes.
And your case against Ms. Gutierrez, that's still pending, right?
That is correct.
Do you believe that your testimony here today is going to help you in your civil case against her?
I'm not here for my civil case. I'm here for this case.
I understand what you're here for, ma'am, but do you believe that your testimony here is going to help you in that case?
I'm not thinking about that case. I'm thinking about the fact that had our armorer or our first AD done their jobs, we would not be here. A woman would not be dead. A mother would not be gone.
And you filed a civil lawsuit over this?
Yes.
For your damages?
Correct.
To get money?
Not for money. It was not how it started.
And you, ma'am, are an EMT basic or an EMT? What is your EMT training?
EMT. There is an EMT, there's EMT advanced or advanced EMT, and there's paramedic.
And you do have a certification, right?
Yes, I do.
Are you licensed through the state of New Mexico?
I am, and the state of California, as well as the National Registry.
In fact, you also have medical experience working at a hospital for almost 3 years,
That
right?
is correct.
And that was in an overflow unit for the emergency room?
We need to approach.
What is your experience? You did say you worked at the hospital, but what is your experience with treating gunshot wounds?
I do not have experience with gunshot wounds. They were not on the floor I worked on.
Why wouldn't you be trained on that type of injury when you're dealing on a set with real guns?
I am trained for it. You asked about my experience at the hospital.
Okay, so you are trained with treating gunshot wounds.
Correct.
But you just don't have experience actually applying that training, is that fair?
Not in the hospital setting or outside of it, correct.
You said on direct that you had 2 trauma bags?
I have my normal bag, which has, it's a 96% bag. It's kind of like a walking Walgreens, but it has gauze in it and trauma shears in case something else is needed until I get my main trauma bag.
Did you have any equipment with you on that day specifically addressed to treating a gunshot wound?
No.
You didn't have chest seals?
No.
Did you have any IVs?
I am not licensed to start IVs. So I would not. And we are on a movie set where there should be no gunshot wounds.
Well, are there other things on a movie set that could cause a thoracic puncture on the set?
Not generally. Not generally. If there is going to be something that's going to happen where something more traumatic like that could happen, then we would request a standby ambulance to be on set with us so that we had all the gear and equipment needed, as well as additional medics to help.
But this movie had knives involved in it, right?
I could not tell you.
And horses?
There were horses.
Snakes?
There were wild snakes. We did not bring them onto set.
Can we approach?
Do you know who intubated Miss Hutchins?
I do not. I can assume, but I do not.
You said, you can assume. Well, I mean, did you see it happen?
I did not.
Okay. Prior to all of these concerns that you're telling us about here today with Ms. Gutierrez, you never raised any of those concerns with anyone?
I did not.
Not even the safety director, David Halls?
I did not.
And you said on direct, I believe, that prior to the shot that you heard on that day, that I think I heard you say, I want to get it clear, that you did not hear Dave Halls yell out, rehearsals up, first team on set. Did you ever hear that?
I did not.
You never heard any call out that they were going to do that set?
No, not on the radio. I did not hear it. It doesn't mean it didn't happen and I didn't hear it, but
no, I just want to know what you heard.
I did not hear that. No.
Okay. No further questions.
Ms. Schaefer, are chest seals and IVs customary for movie set medics?
Chest seals, if you can get them, it's not like we can go to a hospital and pick up equipment that or products that we would keep in our bags. Whatever we generally keep in our bags is something that we buy over the counter. There are ways to make chest seals, but they're not the most. They sometimes hurt more than help. IVs would be something that needs to be ordered, and if you do not have medical direction or a doctor that works at an ER that says yes, you can work to your scope of practice or your license level. If you don't have that, which most medics in New Mexico don't have, most medics don't have that medical direction, you are not allowed to do that outside of a hospital setting or outside of if you are employed by a EMS.
Okay. And shifting gears, you were asked on cross-examination some questions about whether or not safety checks of ammunition would have taken place outside your presence. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
In your experience, are the safety checks of the ammunition done in the presence of the crew and the cast?
Yes.
Do you know if there's a reason for that?
I'm not sure.
Well, if a safety check of ammunition was done outside the presence of the cast and crew, would the cast and crew have knowledge as to the level of safety associated with that ammunition?
Not if it was not done in front of them, no. But the cast and crew are all welcome to ask for it to happen.
Okay. You were asked some questions about a civil lawsuit, and you were asked if you were testifying today because you thought it would help your civil lawsuit.
Correct.
And I think your response was, you didn't do it for money, that's not how it started. So I'd like you to, and then I think you got cut off. I'd like you to go ahead and finish that.
The reason that I brought any kind of lawsuit to anybody in the beginnings is because I wanted change in our industry. I did not want something like this to be able to happen again to anybody else, to their families, to the crew that knows them as family. I wanted some sort of change to happen, some policy change, whether it be required to have a standby ambulance or it be required to have additional medics if there's going to be big stunts or big gunfire or anything that could potentially cause, somebody to become injured. I wanted that change in our industry because on that show there were roughly 75 crew. That is minimal compared to what I normally would have on set. I would have no less than 300 usually before I would be approved to have an additional medic to come and help me. That is just not okay. That is not okay. And being the only medic there with 2 patients, knowing my resources were not close enough to help in any significant way is what I wanted to change.
And Have you suffered from extreme trauma as a result of this?
Yes. Can I just expand?
Sure.
No, Jack.
Okay. Let's proceed. Upon my questioning, you asked if I asked you about your claim for emotional distress, and you responded and asked if you could expand on that. The court is going to let you. Please expand.
Thank you. I went home that night and I looked at my little boy, who's the same age as Helena's son, and all I could think about is how I could not save his mother's life and how he was going to grow up without a mother, and how her spouse lost the love of his life.
Understood.
I did not expect this testimony. I did not expect this testimony. So you're going to, and I mean no harm to you, but we're going to strike that testimony, okay? So disregard that testimony, okay? All right, let's.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. Wait, no.
Jason. Guys. Mr. Bowles.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The emotional expense, her narrative, where she said, can I expand on that? And then she continued on and on and on. That's what you're going to strike, okay? You're going to disregard that as evidence. The rest of it, her direct, her cross-examination, and then her redirect, except when she said, can I expand on that? And then went into, you know, her personal trauma, okay? Any questions on that? Okay, thank you.
Are you ready for the next witness, Your Honor?
Yes, I am.
State calls Mamie Mitchell.
Counsel? Counsel approach. Counsel approach.
Raise your right hand, ma'am.
Do you swear affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you'll give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Just 1 second to get my notes in order. Ma'am, will you state your full name for the record?
Mamie Elizabeth Mitchell.
And Ms. Mitchell, what do you do for a living?
I'm a substitute teacher.
How long have you been a substitute teacher?
I think around 2.5 weeks.
So prior to being a substitute teacher, what did you do for a living?
I was a Hollywood script supervisor.
And can you explain to the jury what a script supervisor does?
Sometimes I pre-time the script.
We don't know what that means.
I read the script, and in my mind I give a producer and director an idea of how long their movie is. And based on that, they'll cut some scenes or add some scenes, build some sets or not build the sets. So it's a budgetary thing. While we're shooting a film, I provide the actors with lines if they need them. I keep the continuity in all areas.
And when you say you keep the continuity, can you explain to us what that means?
It means that your right hand is on your right hip and you're leaning on your left hand. And I'm going to make sure you do that every time we shoot.
That
Move
scene.
the camera. That scene for that dialogue. So it's maintaining the continuity, which brings me to the thing that I really do is to ensure that a film cuts together seamlessly in the editing room, which gives the director choices.
As a part of being a script supervisor, do you keep very close track of all of the filming that's done on the set and the scenes that have been filmed?
Yes, I log every shot, lens, how long the shot is, if it's incomplete, if it's good, if it's not good, if it's fair, if it's the best one. And if there's an airplane on line 6, but then the airplane, it's okay in line 9, sound, everything that has to do with photography, I have in here, and that's translated to the editing room.
Okay. How long were you a script supervisor before you decided to become a substitute teacher?
About 42 years.
And in those years that you have worked in the film industry, how many movies and TV shows do you think you've worked on?
74.
And of those 74, if you can guesstimate for us, how many of those had live guns and an armorer?
I think I've worked with an armorer about 24 times, on 24 films. Sometimes,
Yeah, go ahead.
sometimes maybe a gun is used one time, and if the armor was brought in for that, I'm not really aware of that. But when guns are really a part of a script, about 24 times.
Okay. Safe to say you have a lot of experience with armorers on movie sets.
I do.
As the script supervisor, are you present for every single take that is filmed for every single scene?
Unless it's a second unit, and I have a second unit script supervisor, but for every first unit shot, I'm there for every take.
On the set of Rust, were you there for every take?
Yes.
Okay. So, I am going to ask you if you noticed any differences between Ms. Gutierrez and the other armorers that you worked with on the previous 24 occasions.
Your Honor, objection.
Ma'am, do you recall the question?
No, unfortunately not.
How did Ms. Gutierrez compare to the other previous 24 armorers that you worked with?
I found her to be inexperienced and did not present in the way that I'm used to seeing professional armorers, union armorers, on a film set. It was different.
Did you find her behavior on the film set to be professional?
I did not.
Did you Did you ever take notice of where firearms were stored during filming or around the set?
I saw them on her cart.
And when you saw them on her cart, was she present?
Not all the time.
And was that unusual?
Everything about the cart was unusual.
When you say everything about the cart was unusual, can you explain to the jury what you mean?
In my experience, what I have experienced on film sets is that the armorers are very quiet, focused, and very organized. Everything is very organized. And they're very focused. I don't know if I said that, but they're very focused and sort of methodical about everything. Their movements are very methodical.
I'm going to take you back to your concerns about the cart specifically. Can you explain what your concerns were with the state of the prop cart?
Well, I just never seen anything like it. It just reminded me, I mean, not that it reminded me, but the best way I can describe it is it was like that drawer in your kitchen where you just put stuff that doesn't really go anywhere else, the random things, and you go in to look for something, and just, it was messy to me. It looked different than what I was used to.
Did it seem organized?
No, it did not seem organized.
At any point in time, were you aware that there were what I'm going to refer to as accidental discharges that took place on set?
I was on the set at the cabin.
Hang on, you're a step ahead of me. Were you aware of the accidental discharges?
Yes.
Okay. Were you present for the accidental discharges?
Yes.
Okay, can you go ahead and explain to us what happened with regard to those accidental discharges?
Well, I believe the first one, I was walking. Shall I describe the set? I was from here to where those people are back there, away, walking back. We had camped out over here for a wide shot, and so we kind of moved back, and as I was walking back, there was a gunshot went off. There was a gunshot, and it was frightening.
And do you know the circumstances of that accidental discharge?
Well, it was one of them that I know about now.
No, that's okay. In terms of when you heard the gunshot go off, why was it frightening? It's a Western. You know, we've heard that there's lots of guns and blanks and...
Because it doesn't happen.
What doesn't happen?
Guns do not just go off on a film set.
In your career, do you recall having that ever happen to you?
I do not.
And when, can you give the jury a little bit of background on, given that guns go off on movie sets because there's blank ammunition in the gun and guns are being shot, why would it have startled you? What's the procedure usually for gunshots?
Fire in the hole. Someone yells, "Fire in the hole."
What does that tell you when someone yells that? To tell us what you're doing.
Fingers in your ears, mouth open. You have to keep the mouth open.
Why do you keep your mouth open?
It helps your eardrums. Something about that. That's what we do. I've known that forever. You keep your mouth open and you go like this.
Okay. So
You protect your hearing.
with regard to the accidental discharges, did anyone call fire in the hole?
No,
And how many accidental discharges occurred while you were working on set?
2.
And do you recall if they were the same day?
They were the same day, same set.
Did they cause you to feel concerned?
I was concerned and I was confused.
What do you mean confused?
Shortly after I was hired by Roe Waters to do this movie.
No, I'm sorry. I think I understand, and I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
So let me and let's let me take you to. I'm sorry. Let me back up.
Okay.
Ma'am, you indicated that you are on the set of Rust. You were present for the filming of every take of every scene. Is that right?
Yes.
And I am. Wait a minute. Let's get out of there. Hang on. I am going to show you what is marked as State's Exhibit 164. I'm going to ask to have it entered into evidence, admitted into evidence, and permission to publish.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, States 164 is admitted and you may publish.
So, Ms. Mitchell, you're present every time they're rolling camera, is that right, on Rust?
With the exception of sometimes, just a couple of times.
Hang on, let me ask you this. Do you recall meeting with me and me showing you a video that I wanted you to talk about? That was from October 17th. Do you recall that?
No.
Okay.
I don't. Could you refresh my memory, please?
I will refresh your memory. We're going to have to unplug because I'm going to have to refresh.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's all right.
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay. Do you recall? You know what I'm talking about now?
I do.
Okay. Okay. I think we can turn the monitors back on. Let's go ahead. Were you present for the filming of that take?
Yes, I was.
All right. I'm going to pull up State's Exhibit 164 and publish. Ma'am, do you recall the date that this particular take was filmed? I'm sorry. Hang on just a second. In order for you to refer to your notes, we need you to have a discussion with us.
Okay.
So, as you sit here today, do you recall the date that this was filmed?
I don't recall the date, but it's in my script.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory if you looked at your notes?
Yes.
Okay. So what I want you to do, listen to me carefully.
I am.
I want you to look at your notes. And then I just want you to keep that information to yourself.
Wait a second, don't look in your notes.
Okay.
They get to approach you and see what you're looking at.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I'm going to have this. When you look in your notes, just take note of the date and then wait for a follow-up question, okay?
Okay.
Does counsel wish to approach to see what she's looking at?
I don't need to see her notes. Do you want to see her notes?
I'd like to see it.
Sure.
You said it was a script?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shall I open it up? Okay. All right. You can come around here if you want.
Okay.
This is.
Ms. Mitchell, go ahead and take your time and see if you can find that. I apologize.
Well, I don't want to get into why this is confusing, but I think a gremlin came in and took the page because I can't find it.
Hang on just a second.
I might have moved it. Should be October 20th. It's October 20th.
No,
No?
stop for a second. I told you to wait for a follow-up question.
Sorry.
Don't just speak, okay?
Okay.
Wait with us.
Okay. Here it is. I found it.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay, that's her memory refreshed.
Okay, has your memory been refreshed as to the date?
Yes.
And let me just ask you, and you can close, take note of the date, okay? And is there something that's on the screen that helps you refer to your notes?
10/17.
No, go ahead and answer my question.
Yes.
What's on the screen that helps you refer, that helps you find that in your notes?
125 Charlie, the scene number.
Okay, so the 125C is the scene number. Is that what you said?
That's the slate number. The scene is 125. This is the slate number.
Okay. And so are you able to compare your notes to the information on that slate?
Yes.
And were you present for the filming of this take?
I was.
And what was the date that this was filmed on?
October 17th,
All right.
2021.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and publish it now.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark. We have to do the footprints again. Hold on. So we're here. He's camera left? No, that's it. I'm sorry?
It's my understanding that part of your job is continuity. Is that right?
Correct.
So I'm going to ask you, can you identify this prop that we're looking at right here on Mr. Baldwin?
Yes.
What is that prop?
It's his over-the-shoulder holster
And
bandolier thing.
his holster or bandolier, you said?
Mm-hmm.
And what are these things that are right here?
Bullets.
And is that the way that the bandolier was loaded on October 17th?
Correct.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to take you to the date of October 21st, 2021. Were you working on set that day?
Yes.
We understand that there was some filming in the morning, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Do you recall taking a lunch break that day?
I do.
And well, let me back up. We've heard a lot of testimony that the camera crew walked off that day.
Yes.
And did you have a discussion with Mr. Souza and Ms. Hutchins about making the day?
I did.
Okay, without saying what they said, can you just tell us what you said to them in terms of that conversation?
I said, I turned to Helena and I said, I shoot with one camera all my career until shooting with two cameras became the thing. I said, and then I looked at Joel and I said, if we're organized and you have a plan, we can make the day with one camera. And Elena said, I shoot with the one camera too all the time.
Okay, provided only for context. So we understand that there was some filming, and then you went to lunch. I want you to start after lunch. Where it's our understanding that there's something going on in the church preparing for a scene. If you can describe that to us, please. Do you recall, let me ask you this, when you went into the church after lunch, were other people already there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And
after lunch.
After lunch. We're only going to talk about after lunch.
Okay. Yes.
So when you were in the church after lunch, who do you recall being in the church?
Doran Curtin.
And Ms. Curtin, what was her role on set?
Wardrobe.
Okay. Keep going, please.
She had blood. She was going to refresh blood.
Fake blood, I assume.
Fake blood.
Okay.
I switched places with her because she's real tall, and I said, could I stand in front of you? And we laughed, and I went in front of her. Helena, Serge, my director, Ross, Zach, Alec Baldwin in the pew with the gun, Karen Kuhn.
Who's Karen Kuhn?
She's a still photographer.
Thank you.
And she was on this side.
Okay, thank you.
Coming into the church, I think there was a special effects guy there, maybe the supervisor.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When you came into the church, did Mr. Baldwin already have his gun?
Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay, so you didn't see how he got the gun or who handed him the gun?
I did not.
Okay, so you come into the church.
Dave Hall was there also.
Okay, Mr. Halls was there.
Sorry.
How long before the gun goes off are you in the church?
Not very long at all.
Okay, so when you come into the church, you've indicated these people were there. What was happening in the moments before the gun went off?
I switched place with Doran. Helena was here, and she's doing her thing with the light, you know, looking at him. She's doing her lighting. And people are not static on a film set. So it's a dance. And she's doing this and looking at there was an onboard monitor, and Joel is looking, and they're there, and she's doing her thing and looking at him and that. And I don't know what everybody else was doing, but that's what they were doing.
Okay.
I saw the camera. I had an idea of what shot it was. 1 of 3. I hadn't seen the lens yet, so I wasn't sure what it was yet. And that's what they were doing.
And then what happened?
And then I took my phone out.
It's okay.
I took my phone out. Oh, the actor was practicing on his own.
Mr. Baldwin?
Yeah, he was practicing. And as I was doing, he was practicing. And then when I looked down to my phone to get got the picture. I was going to check his wardrobe, make sure everything matched.
And let me stop you. As a part of your continuity job, do you frequently take photos and videos on your phone?
I frequently take photos.
Okay.
Sometimes it flips. I take photos.
Okay. When you said sometimes it flips, on occasion, do you end up with a live photo or a short video?
Yes.
Okay. So you're using your phone for continuity.
Constantly.
Okay. What happens then?
So I got my picture, and I was gonna check his wardrobe, and right when I was doing that explosion.
And when that happens, what do you do? My body, I had it was a shock. And then I heard a guttural moaning, and I looked around, and my director was crab crawling backwards, and then I turned around to look at Alec, and when I did, she was falling in my direction, and I ran. And when you say she was falling, you mean
Helena Hutchins was falling, and I ran.
And why did you run?
To get help.
And so.
And away from danger.
Okay. Where did you go?
I ran out the door, down the steps to the left, towards one of the set. It was a set deck truck, one of the trucks, and with my phone, and I start dialing 911.
And are you the person that called 911 in this case?
I am.
And when you spoke to 911, how did you describe the incident that you were calling them for? Ms. Mitchell.
I believe I said we've had 2 people shot accidentally on a film set. We need help immediately.
And why did you use the word accidentally?
I did not want her to think there was an active shooter or a mass shooting. I needed, and gather an army together. I wanted to come right away.
Okay.
Help right away.
And you thought that if law enforcement or medics thought that it was an active shooter, it may take them more time. Is that what you mean?
That's correct.
Okay. And ma'am, have you also filed a civil lawsuit against the production company and other folks in this case?
I have.
Are you testifying today because you think it's going to help your civil lawsuit?
No, it's not going to help my civil lawsuit at all.
Are you testifying truthfully today?
I am.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll pass the witness.
Well, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. I just have a few questions for you, not too much. First of all, I want to go back to your movies with the other armors. You said there was about 24 of them, give or take. Okay. On those, did you ever have a situation where there was a part-time armor, to your knowledge, somebody that did part-time armory and part-time something else?
I think there might have been 1 or 2.
Were those day people, or was that part-time? What's that term you used earlier, day? When they just come in for a day and then they're gone?
A day player?
Day player. Were those day players, or was that a part-time armor?
Do you mean, was it a prop master who also does armory?
Yes, yes, even a day player that did both.
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's a day player.
Okay. Now, with regard to seeing the cart you mentioned, do you know whether when you saw the cart sometimes whether those firearms on there were real or whether they were replica firearms?
Not to my knowledge. I think everything was a real firearm.
Okay. Are you not aware whether there were any replica firearms, any fake type firearms on Rust?
No.
Okay. Now, also, you were aware that the armor would be called to scenes sometimes, right? That she'd have to be on a scene when they were filming?
I don't know what you mean by on a scene.
Okay, in or around it, when firearms were being used, she had to be in or around that scene?
All armorers have to be present when a firearm is being used.
Okay, and that wasn't my question. My question was, did you know on this movie set that the armorer sometimes had to be in or near the scene when firearms were being used?
Yes.
Okay. So on those times, it would be impossible for the armorer to be at her cart too, right?
Well, I've never heard of that before.
Well, kind of hard to be in two places at one time, isn't it? That's kind of the point. Now, did you know whether this cart was shared with props and armory men?
I think it was.
So when you saw the messy, and you described it, your kitchen drawer where you put everything, do you know if the props people were coming and putting their stuff on it too?
I think they were.
Okay. And so do you know who might have caused the things to be in different places? Was it props, or you don't know who was doing that? Do you?
I do.
Who?
They were all doing it.
Okay. So did you see him?
Yes.
You saw Sarah Zachary putting stuff on it? Yeah.
3 women at a cart. Sometimes.
Okay. Now, with regard to the discharge that you said you heard, you remember that?
Which one?
Well, you described when you were walking, I think you said you heard a sound, a shot. Is that right?
A misfire.
Yes. Okay.
2 of them.
Okay. Did you find out about that well after? Or were you actually there?
I was there. It almost blew my ears out.
Okay. Now, do you know whether any of that was special effects?
It was not special effects.
Okay. Did you report that to anybody?
Everyone, I didn't have to report it. Everybody knew it.
Okay. Everybody in production?
I don't know about production. Everyone on the set heard it.
Okay. Do you know if Dave Halls heard it?
Dave Halls was there.
Okay. So he would have known, so you wouldn't have had to tell him, right?
Everyone who was at that set, on that set, and there were a lot of people, heard the gun go off accidentally, twice.
Okay. Different topic. In the script, do you remember whether it required a draw in the scene on October 21st, 2021, after lunch? Did that scene require a draw from the holster? For the actor, for Mr. Baldwin to draw from his holster?
It did.
Okay. Do you remember if that required him to point the weapon?
That's not the shot that we discussed before lunch.
Okay. So was that in the script or not?
No.
Okay. I have nothing further on.
I don't have any additional
Okay.
questions. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. You're
Thank you very
excused.
much. Thank you.
You too. All right, we're going to break for the week. So, no, just because we did a whole week. All right, I don't want to confuse anybody. We're going to break for the day. Okay? All right. So, please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court. Do not do any research. Do not Google about the case or the trial, you know, the Rust production, anything, okay? The evidence is what you receive in court. Very, very important, okay? Have a good and safe weekend. We'll see you this minute.
One of the jurors wants just to
one of the jurors wants to be reassured that we're not going past the 8th. I can't give that reassurance, okay?
Can we approach on
Yeah,
that though?
sure.
It might be helpful.
Is that correct? Okay. You don't have to, nobody has to nod their head on which one of you wants to know. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so not past, whether it's going to go past the 8th, they think that they will finish their case the day before that.
And that would be finishing both cases.
Yes. Assuming everything goes at the right clip. But then, so.
Judge, just a point of clarification. What we discussed is that we expect, hopefully, to be doing closing arguments the morning of the 7th.
Okay, but that doesn't mean your deliberations are not going to go past the 8th. All right? Because once it's handed to you, it's however long you all deliberate. Okay? So I would say, in an abundance of caution, that it will go past the 8th as far as deliberations go. That's in an abundance of caution. Okay? Just knowing jurors have to get situated after they get the evidence, and then, you know, it just depends. Okay? Am I making myself clear? Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. We're in recess.
All rise.